Scammers are stealing billions of dollars from America's seniors, and they're ramping up their efforts. With calls, texts, or clicks, they can steal a senior's entire life savings. But we have the power to stop these criminals. AARP is fighting for bipartisan, common-sense solutions to protect older Americans' hard-earned money from scammers. Join us today. Visit action.aarp.org/fraud pledge. Paid for by AARP.
Welcome to the program. No victocrats allowed because we've got a country to save. So let's get her teed up!
You want to play rock? Say hello to my little friend.
What the hell's going on out here?
Ooh, that's a bingo.
Triple 971 SAGE. 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. An Iranian ship has challenged the blockade. U.S. military stopped that ship and boarded it. Senator Tim Kaine falsely accuses Trump of, quote, tearing up the Iran deal, end of quote. CNN's Jake Tapper denounces Trump's judicial nominees for refusing to say yes when asked, quote, did Biden win the 2020 election? Does Tapper have a problem with Democrats who refuse to acknowledge that Trump won the 2016 election? Trump did not start the redistricting fight over Texas. Democrats started it years earlier. The Pope says he is not fighting with President Trump. Representative Brandon Gill tees off on Democrat congressmen for belittling the congressional hearing on migrant crime. A former Obama advisor says O.J. Simpson represents the black community because he, wait for it, killed 2 white people. California Democrats want to pass what has been called the Stop Nick Shirley Act to make it more difficult to uncover fraud. The Gavin Newsom campaign money accounts for 2/3 of the sales of his new New York Times best-selling book. So he paid for the book itself to make it a bestseller. All of this and more, 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. Of course, dissent is welcome. Let's start first with some breaking news. This is now the 3rd cabinet member to resign after Pam Bondi and Kristi Noem. The Labor Secretary, Lori Chavez de Rimmer, has resigned. The resignation follows a Inspector General probe into misconduct allegations against her and her staff, including claims that she had an affair with a subordinate, that she was drinking on the job, that she misused resources, and there were civil rights complaints from employees over a hostile work environment. 2 former top aides were forced out early March following pressure and the expansion of the probe. Apparently her position became, how can I put it, untenable. So she's out. What's the over-under when someone on CNN or MSNBC accuses Trump of, quote, forcing out female members of his administration? Now, let's turn to the approval rating of the president. This is a new NBC poll. 37% of adults, according to this NBC poll, approve of President Trump's performance. 67% disapprove, including 50% who say they disapprove strongly, putting his rating at the lowest point in his second term. 2/3 disapprove of his handling of inflation and of the Iran conflict. More broadly, 1/3 of Americans believe the country is on the right track. 2/3 believe it's on the wrong track. Again, this is an NBC poll. This is the most pessimistic outlook in NBC polling since Trump retook the office last year. Again, NBC poll. The economy continues to be the top issue for Americans. 29% saying it's the issue that most concerns them. 24% said threats to democracy is their most concerning issue. 12% said health care. 10% said crime and safety. Just 32% say they approve of Trump's handling of inflation and the cost of living, compared to 68% who disapprove. Regarding Republicans, the percentage of Republicans who say they approve of Trump's handling of inflation is 73%. While that's high, it is 10 points lower than it was in their last poll. More Americans say their personal financial situation is worse than it was a year ago. 40% say that. 19% say it's better. Republicans are twice as likely as independents and Democrats, and 3 times likely as Democrats, to say their situation is better. 34% of Republicans feel that way, compared to 48% who say it's the same versus 18% who say it's worse. Isn't it amazing? We're talking about economics here, gas prices, cost of living, and so forth. How can Republicans see things so very differently than do Democrats? Answer is the bombardment that the Trump is getting in the media, where 92% ABC, NBC, CBS of the news covering President Trump is negative. And even though a smaller percentage of Americans get their primary source from these, they get their secondary source from them, and their Yahoo feed and Facebook feed generates the same kind of thing from Associated Press or from these major news sources. And if you look at the nightly newscasts, they still generate around 30 million people, which is much, much higher than any newscast on Fox News. 55% of Democrats and 46% of independents say their economic situation is worse than it was last year. 2/3 of Americans say gas prices have been a problem for them and their family. 29% call it a serious problem. 36% call it a somewhat serious problem. 29% said not too serious, and 9% say it's not a problem at all. Blue-collar workers and Americans with lower levels of education are more likely than white-collar workers and those with college or postgraduate degrees to call rising gas prices a problem. Almost all Democrats and independents disapprove of Trump's handling of the war, 82%, while 74% Republicans approve. But the share of Republicans who disapprove of Trump's handling of the war, 26%, is higher than the share of Republicans who disapproved of Trump's overall job rating. Now, those who describe themselves as MAGA are still behind the president. 13% of the self-described supporters of MAGA say disapprove of Trump's handling of the war. 87% say they approve. So a substantial difference between how Democrats, Republicans see things and independents, and how Republicans who describe themselves as MAGA see things. The president said that Iran has tried to get cute with an Iranian flag ship attempting to run the blockade. The blockade, the attempt was stopped, and the U.S. military boarded the ship. Here's what President Trump said about this, number 16.
Talking about Iran later, we have very good conversations going on. It's working out very well. They got a little cute, as they have been doing for 47 years. Nobody ever took them on. We took them on. They have no Navy. They have no Air Force. They have no leaders. They have no nothing. Actually, their leaders are, it is regime change. You call that enforced regime change. But we're talking to them. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years. And they can't blackmail us. In fact, a lot of the ships are coming up to Texas. I don't know if you know, in Louisiana, the ships are coming up. They got used to it. Maybe they'll keep doing it. It's worked out pretty good. But it's going actually along very well. And we'll see. But we'll have some information by the end of the day. We're talking to them. And, we're taking a tough stand. They've killed a lot of people. A lot of our people have been killed. A lot of your fellow soldiers have been killed over the years by Iran. The roadside bomb. Soleimani, I killed Soleimani.
He was making the explosive form penetrators. They were making them in Iran, bringing them to Iraq, and blasting through the vehicles.
Well, he was a...
You know what's obnoxious? How often Democrats go on CNN and MSNBC. Mr. McConnell, did I say something that amused you? He laughed when I said, what's obnoxious? We're going to have a segment called You Know What's Obnoxious down the road, so stay tuned for that. Watching the programs, again, on CNN and MSNBC, so you don't have to, and sometimes ABC and NBC and CBS, although CBS may be changing, it's got a new owner now, to hear how many people go on television and say, well, Iran was not on a path towards a nuke when they had signed the nuclear deal, and Trump came in and tore up the deal. I hear it over and over and over again. Never mind that Iran was cheating, which is what the Israelis said. Never mind that the deal did not cover the missile program. We found out they had range to go as far as Diego Garcia, which is 2,500 miles away, which means they have the capacity to hit every European capital. And never mind that the deal had nothing to do whatsoever with their support for the terror proxies. But Iran was abiding by the deal until Trump came in and tore it up. What Trump did is withdrew from the deal. The deal was still in place. The European countries that subscribed to it were still there. Iran was still a member. And Iran was still a member of the deal until 7 years later. So Biden comes in, removes, lessens the sanctions. Iran continues to enrich well beyond the level that they were permitted in the deal, that they claimed that they were abiding by. Drives me crazy. And you have Senator Tim Kaine on TV saying the very same thing. I'll come back and have that for you. So the deal was still in place. Nothing stopped Iran from, okay, America's gone, but we're still going to abide by the deal because we believe that the deal is a good deal, and we want the world to know that we're not trying to get a nuclear bomb. We're not trying to enrich uranium for military purposes. All we want to do is use it for peaceful purposes. We're going to stay in the deal. And they stayed in the deal for years. And Biden rewarded them by softening the sanctions. And what did they do? They continued to enrich beyond the levels allowed by the deal that supposedly Donald Trump tore up. I'm Larry Elder. Parents, the biggest question in education today is how artificial intelligence is shaping the way your student learns. Artificial intelligence is changing education faster than most schools are willing to admit, and many families are rightly concerned. At Patrick Henry College, the goal isn't to outsource thinking to machines. It's to train students to think for themselves. PHC emphasizes a Christian liberal arts education that develops reasoning, writing, speaking, and discernment skills no algorithm can replace. Students learn to engage technology wisely, understanding its capabilities, but also its danger and limitations, rather than becoming dependent on it. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, Patrick Henry College prepares students to lead with wisdom, conviction, and moral clarity. If you want a college that prepares your child to lead in an AI-driven world without losing his or her faith and values, I encourage you to learn more about Patrick Henry College. Visit phc.edu/elder. That's phc.edu/elder.
And those limits were similar to the limits on other countries as well. But before the deal, we had no ability, no transparency in the Iranian system. So what we had with the agreement was an agreement never to get weapons and inspections and limitations. And that then would give us a legal justification if they broke the agreement and went toward a nuclear weapon where we could talk about military options. Instead, President Trump tore up the deal. If you make diplomacy impossible...
SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Settling News Channel. You hear that? The deal was for them never to get a weapon. That wasn't the deal. It postponed it. President Trump tore up the deal. Trump withdrew from the deal in May of 2018. Iran began enriching its uranium to 60%. Did not begin enriching uranium to 60% until April 2021. In short, it made this big leap under Biden watch, not Trump's, under Biden's. So why did they wait? Because Biden gave them sanction relief, rewarded them. And Iran's so-called breakout time shrank to a matter of weeks. Sanction relief followed. Iran blew past the restrictions in the deal, accelerated its missile and drone program, deepened its support for proxies. That's an example of how well the deal was working. But that's the mantra. I'm sure you're hearing it at work. I'm sure you're hearing it during family gatherings. Well, things were just going swimmingly until President Trump blew up the Iran deal. And when you hear that, ask, did Iran stay in the deal? Yes. Did the Europeans stay in the deal? Yes. When did Iran enrich uranium beyond the level the deal allowed? Oh, under the Biden administration. Not under the Trump administration, under the Biden administration. They were very likely afraid of what Trump would do. And please don't give me this stuff about the Iran deal meant that Iran would never get a nuke. All it did was postpone the time. Gave them a glide path. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. As to what we should do right now, given that Iran already broke the deal, you knew they were going to. First of all, I'm not even sure who's in charge. It appears that the IRGC is in charge. These are the hardliners, even harder than the Ayatollahs, the thugs. Keith Kellogg, former Lieutenant General of the National Security Advisor, said this about the IRGC, number 28.
When you look at the Iranians right now, the negotiators, like Arachi, their foreign minister, he's a Revolutionary Guards guy. When you look at the Speaker of the Parliament, he's a Revolutionary Guards guy. The Revolutionary Guards and their army are two distinctly separate things. The Revolutionary Guards have got the power. That's who's really being hurt right now. And they're not going to change their colors right now. They're going to keep supporting the Supreme Leader. They're going to keep focusing on the United States of America, and I don't trust them. I would keep my foot on the throat until they quit or cry uncle, whatever you want to call it. But I know we can give them more time. And when you say more time, I mean more time for them to finish the job and go home. I just don't trust them at all. Remember Reagan said, trust but verify to Gorbachev?
The Democrats were defeated in trying to pass a resolution to say that the war is unlawful, but they'll try again. This is Texas Representative Keith Self, number 5.
And as long as we're talking about this operation, we tend to forget that President Obama attacked Libya for 7 months with no authorization from Congress. 7 months with no authorization from Congress.
And let's play again Adam Schiff on the Bill Maher show. Bill Maher gives him a quote from a president who justified the use of war, and Adam Schiff assumed the quote was from President Donald Trump, when in fact it was from President Obama. Number 12.
This statement from the administration: the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization. I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress. But I respect the fact that that was important to him, and the fact that he did not have the support of Congress meant that we weren't going to go forward. We are unquestionably at war now. The founders made an extraordinary decision at the time, which was not to give that power to the president, but to give it to the Congress, because they worried, I think, as Hamilton said, that a president would grow too fond of making war. After Venezuela, after the earlier Iran conflict, after bombing Nigeria and Iraq and Syria, he's grown too fond of this. And Congress, Don, as you're saying, needs to step up.
Now, I want to applaud Bill Maher for giving Adam Schiff a quote from Obama and having him try to explain why it is that he didn't have a problem with Obama bombing Libya for 7 months, but he got a problem with Donald Trump at the time, his military campaign against Iran, which at the time was about a month into it. However, Bill Maher did not follow up when Adam Schiff completely changed the topic. Well, Obama also wanted to go against Syria and blah, blah, blah. That wasn't the question. Question is, where were you when Obama bombed Libya for 7 months, giving you the authorization or the quote that Bill Maher just gave you? Let's hear it again.
This statement from the administration: the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization. I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress. But I respect the fact that that was important to him, and the fact that he did not have the support of Congress meant that we weren't going to go forward. We are unquestionably at war now. The founders made an extraordinary...
Okay. Once again, why was that okay when Obama said, well, you know, I have the authority? Totally vague, outrageous. No. Well, that was Obama, and the dude did not miss a beat. He's that good. But Bill Maher did not say, excuse me, Senator, you didn't ask the question. I just gave you a quote from Barack Obama, not Donald Trump. Did you object to the war against Libya that we did, along with the French and the British, for 7 months? And if you didn't, why are you objecting to what Donald Trump is doing right now? That would have been the appropriate follow-up question, but Bill Maher didn't do that. We come back. If Virginia passes its gerrymandering law, there'll be one Republican member in the entire state of Virginia. 888-971-SAGE. And guess who's in favor of it? I'm Larry Elder. Triple 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel coming to you from the Relief Factor studio. Don't forget your Relief Factor, 800-4RELIEF, 800 the number 4RELIEF, ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Virginia will soon be voting on a redistricting plan, which will reduce all of the House seats in that state to one. One. Even though it's a purplish state where almost half of the voters are Republicans. One. California, as you know, did the same thing, reduced the number of likely Republican seats from 11 to very likely down to 4. That's what these people are doing. At one time, Democrats opposed gerrymandering. Even Barack Obama one time opposed it. But then he cut an ad in favor of what they're doing in Virginia. We're going to talk about that. And CNN's Jake Tapper teed off on Trump judicial nominees who, when asked, do you believe that Joe Biden won the 2020 election, wouldn't say yes or no. They simply said, well, Biden was certified the winner. Well, but yes or no, do you believe he won? Biden was certified the winner. And Mr. Tapper had a real problem with that. We're going to talk about how hypocritical and how much selective outrage that was. 888-971-SAGE. James is in LaGrange, Georgia. James, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling.
Hi, Larry. Thank you for all you do for us and for this country. I'm 75 years old, fourth-generation combat veteran. Don't want to argue with anybody, and I'm certainly not going to try to express my opinion in the public eye. I just wanted to tell you thank you for all you do. My grandfather taught me that you don't argue with idiots and you don't try to reason with a fool. Having said that, I'll leave you to the show and just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I want to say thank you, too, for your generations-long family serving our country. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's the problem with Iran, isn't it? They have never abided by anything. This Iran deal was built on a lie. The Deputy National Security Advisor who arranged it, spearheaded it, gave an interview to the New York Times, don't ask me why he did it, and said, well, you know, we sold this Iran deal on this narrative that there was a group of moderate ayatollahs and hardliner ayatollahs. And if you want to give the upper hand to the moderates, you need to do this deal. And then he admitted that he sold that narrative, and the narrative was fake. By the way, his background was in fine arts. He was a fiction writer. No background in foreign policy, national security. His name is Rhodes, Ben Rhodes. That was his background. And he said the reason we were able to sell this fake narrative is that because newspapers have slashed veteran staffs down to the bone, the average person covering foreign policy is 27 years old, quote, and they literally know nothing. That was his quote, not mine. So Iran was cheating anyway. As I said earlier, the deal did not cover their ballistic missile program at all, did not cover their support for Houthis, for Hezbollah, for Hamas. They were cheating anyway. And when you hear somebody say Donald Trump tore up the deal was still in place. There were a bunch of people that signed that deal. We pulled out, reimposed sanctions. Iran stayed in the deal until 2025. And they began enriching beyond where the deal allowed during the Biden administration. But supposedly, the reason that we're having this difficulty, the reason that Iran is this close to getting a nuke is because Donald Trump tore up the deal. Incredibly, incredibly wrong. And nobody says anything other than people maybe on Fox News or Newsmax that push back. Unbelievable. Philip is in San Jose. Philip, you're on the Larry Elder Show.
Hello, Larry. How are you?
I'm well, Philip.
Well, I had a difference with you back when you ran for governor, and it's over now. I forgave you, and I love you. And I'm telling you one thing. Iran is so out of line, it's unbelievable. And you're the only one that will stand up and tell it how it is. And I love you for that.
Well, Philip, thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it. There are others who are standing up and telling it like it is. I'm not the only one, but I appreciate it. The idea that you can reason with these people. Now, for 250 years, Americans have believed in one powerful idea, that we were meant to live free, free to work hard, free to move, free to enjoy life without being held back. But if everyday aches and pains are slowing you down, it might be time to declare your independence from pain. I've told you about how Kirk had difficulty going up and down the stairs in the morning until he followed my advice, began taking Relief Factor. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free, research-based formula designed to help your body fight inflammation, one of the root causes of pain. It's not a quick fix or a temporary mask. It works from the inside out, at the source. Relief Factor was created so people could get back to living life on their terms, walking, working, exercising, and enjoying the moments that matter. This year, as we celebrate 250 years of American independence, take a stand for your own freedom. Declare your independence from pain. Try Relief Factor today for just $19.95. Your 3-week quick start is ready for you. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com, 800-4-RELIEF, 800 the number 4-RELIEF. Triple 8-971 SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. A couple of things going on in Virginia. Virginia has also signed up on a bill that would get rid of the Electoral College. People don't realize how close we are to getting rid of the Electoral College. And Virginia voters are going to be considering a bill to gerrymander the state so that ultimately there's just one Republican House seat in a state that's probably 50-50. At one time, Obama opposed gerrymandering. Now Obama has cut a commercial in favor of it. Here's Obama in favor of the Virginia gerrymander, number 34.
Hey, Virginia. Early voting is underway, and Virginians are turning out in record numbers to vote yes. By voting yes, you have a chance to do something important, not just for the Commonwealth, but for our entire country. By voting yes, you can push back against the Republicans trying to give themselves an unfair advantage in the midterms. By voting yes, you can take a temporary step to level the playing field. And we're counting on you. Early voting is happening right now. Election Day is on April 21st. So go to iwillvote.com/VA to find your closest polling location. Make a plan, show up, and vote yes, Virginia.
Now, you're going to hear that the reason we're in this, quote, mess is because Donald Trump pressured Texas to engage in redistricting to create several more Republican seats. A couple problems with that argument. Texas law allowed redistricting after 5 years. Their constitution, unlike California, did not have to be changed in order to allow this, so they legally could do it in 5-year intervals. More importantly, you act as if President Trump started this, when in fact it was Democrats. This is former Attorney General Eric Holder, February 2018 on NBC, number 20.
During the redistricting process that occurred in 2011, Republicans used new technology to take gerrymandering to what I would say were unprecedented levels. By creating safe districts, they locked themselves into power over this past decade and shut out, I believe, voters from the electoral process. We're going to focus on switching the balance of power on redistricting by electing Democrats committed to redistricting, fair redistricting, in key races that will have an impact on that process. And this will help the stage for new fair maps in 2021. New maps are drawn are drawn following the census every 10 years, and the officials elected to 4-year terms in 2018 will be the people sitting at the table when it comes to 2021, and these are the people who will be responsible for drawing those maps. This makes the elections in 2018 very vital. These are in some ways the first critical step for putting in place people who will take power back from politicians and give it to the people. We have a system now where politicians are picking their voters as opposed to citizens choosing who their representatives are going to be. And that's a fundamental affront to our system of democracy.
Now, again, that was Eric Holder in 2018. You hear him say fair redistricting? Fair? By the way, I've told this before. When Barack Obama was a state senator, he decided to run for the U.S. House of Representatives and primaried a guy named Bobby Rush, who was also a Democrat. And Obama got crushed. The only political race he ever lost. Got crushed. You know what he did? He used computers to redesign his state Senate district to make him even more unlikely to ever lose. He made it less black, less poor, more white, and more Jewish, because those are the areas where he won against Bobby Rush. In other words, he picked his voters rather than the other way around, which is what Eric Holder just now said is an affront. Here's what Eric Holder, that was 2018, here's what Eric Holder is now saying about Virginia, number 29.
The Democrats can certainly win if it's a fair fight. And the question I have... It wasn't going to be a fair fight in Virginia? No, it wasn't going to be a fair fight nationally if you try to steal seats in Texas, in North Carolina, and in Missouri. And so the question I have for people who are critical of that which we're doing is, what were we supposed to do? Nothing? Just allow them to try to stack the deck, to try to steal seats? And all we're trying to do is meet them and try to make the system as fair as it possibly can be. And that's all that this is about. And it's temporary, and it is also something that the citizens have the ability to say yes or no to.
Again, let's go back to Obama. Opposing gerrymandering, number 32.
What is preventing us from tackling them and making more progress really has to do with our politics and our civic life. It has to do with the fact that because of things like political gerrymandering, our parties have moved further and further apart, and it's harder and harder to find common ground. Because of money in politics, special interests dominate the debates in Washington in ways that don't match up with what the broad majority of Americans feel.
So that was so then when Obama was critical of gerrymandering, because he said that means the politicians pick their voters rather than the other way around. And Obama gerrymandered his state Senate seat, as I said earlier, to make it far more difficult for him to ever lose. So gerrymandering is fine when it advances their interest. When it advances the interest of Republicans, it's an affront to democracy. Obama now supports what Virginia is doing. Number 33.
I think that there are real problems with how we are electing our representatives. I think political gerrymandering has resulted in a situation in which with 80% Democratic districts or 80% Republican districts and no competition.
So that was then. but this is now. Now, every spam call, every scam text, every sketchy email with your name, each one starts the same way. Somebody found you. Your phone number is sitting on data broker sites right now. So is your home address, your email, your age, even the names of your family members. All of it searchable and for sale. And scammers don't need to be hackers to get it. They just need Google in 5 minutes. Every scam starts with one thing, your personal info being available to the wrong person. So forget the spam filters, the call blockers. The real fix? Disappear. That's what Incogni does. They contact hundreds of data brokers and legally force them to remove your information. I'm using Incogni to get my names and info away from these data brokers. They can't spam you if they can't find you. Right now, get 60% off with an exclusive deal at incogni.com/Larry. Go to incogni.com/Larry and take back your privacy. That's incogni.com/Larry, incogni.com/Larry, LARRY.
Take all my blues away.
I think that there are real problems with how we are electing our representatives. I think political gerrymandering has resulted in a situation in which with 80% Democratic districts or 80% Republican districts and no competition, that leads to more and more polarization in Congress, and it gets harder and harder to get things done. I think that the Senate filibuster process and the 60-vote requirement to break a filibuster is making it harder and harder to govern at a time where there's polarization. I think the influence of super PACs and the ability of a handful of billionaires to dictate who can compete or not compete, for example, in a Republican primary, with a debate coming up, that's a problem. So I think there are a whole range of systems problems that we have to resolve.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Coming up, Jake Tapper on CNN tees off on Trump judicial nominees when asked, did Biden win the 2020 election? They responded, Joe Biden was certified the winner. Yeah, but did he win the 2020 election? Well, Joe Biden was certified the winner, and Jake Tapper just went off. We're going to talk about that. Let me tell you what's at stake, though, down the road. Democrats are going to, of course, try to impeach President Trump if they take control of the House. That'll be one of their first orders of business. They're going to pass all sorts of legislation to make Puerto Rico a state, so they get 2 more Democrat senators, to make Washington, D.C. a state, to get 2 more Democrat senators. They're going to add several more seats to the Supreme Court, probably 4, to make it 13, so they can keep winning, start winning cases that they're now losing. They're going to get rid of the Electoral College. They're going to do mass amnesty for something like 30 million illegal aliens in the country. They, of course, will make the borders porous again. This is what is at stake. This country has never had a higher percentage of Americans saying they're not proud to be Americans, even as probably half the world's population would come here if they could get here. As we're speaking, Haitians are lining up for a shot at a lottery to come into America. Yet much of the American left despises the principles upon which this country was founded. You had Senator Tim Kaine even disputing that America has its rights coming from God, not from people. I'm Larry Elder. Don't go away. So let's get her teed up!
You want to play what? Say hello to my little friend!
What the hell's going on out
That's a bingo.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. We're going to get into CNN's Jake Tapper teeing off on the Trump judicial nominees for refusing to say yes when asked whether they believe Biden won the 2020 election. But first, let's go to Christopher in Pinehurst, North Carolina. Christopher, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you for calling.
Thanks for taking my call. Just quick question. I was hoping you could explain, if we're supposed to be energy independent, why does the war have such an effect on our gas prices? And if we're not quite there yet, what's it going to take to be there so this kind of conflict doesn't have any effect on our country?
Christopher, thank you for calling. Here's the deal that people don't quite understand. Oil is a world commodity. When the price goes up anywhere, it goes up everywhere. 20% of the world's oil supply passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And when that is interfered with, the price of oil is going to go up. Now, when America says we are energy independent, that means our supply will always be there. But the cost itself is going to go up if the supply is interrupted anywhere in the world. Now, the reason we have various gas prices throughout the country, some states higher than others, is not because of the price of crude. The price of crude is the same no matter whether you buy the gas in Texas or in Hawaii or in California. The difference is state and local taxes and the fuel requirements in places like California because of the Green New Deal-ish policies in California. That's why California has such high gas prices, even though the price of the crude in California is the same as it is everywhere else. So oil is a worldwide commodity. And when it goes up anywhere, it goes up everywhere. That's the problem. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it. Now let's talk about Jake Tapper, who refers to illegal aliens as undocumented, on CNN. I'm watching it on Sunday, so you don't have to. And let me play it for you. I'll be interrupting from time to time. Number 35.
At his hearing this week to be appointed to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, nominee Justin Smith was asked a pretty simple question.
Will you acknowledge that President Trump lost the 2020 election to Joe Biden?
Now, this isn't a matter for debate among any serious, honest person remotely familiar with the facts. There was simply not sufficient evidence of fraud that would have changed the results of the 2020 election.
Let me interject something here. You know, we've had John Eastman on the program just on Friday. He talked about fraud in Wisconsin, shenanigans in Pennsylvania, shenanigans in Michigan. But as far as Jake Tapper is concerned, it's an article of fact that Joe Biden won the 2020 election. You can't ask any questions whatsoever. As John Eastman and I discussed, there was a 4-3 decision in the Wisconsin case. A dissent was filed by the Supreme Court justice of the Wisconsin case, who felt that things like democracy in the park and concerns about how people in memory wings in nursing homes were voting were sufficient enough so that they should have had a case on the merits, not just on procedural grounds. But let's just put that aside. Jake Tapper is just assuming, of course, that anybody who suggests that 2020 was riddled with irregularities, shenanigans, if not illegalities, is just full of it. Continue.
Affirmed by Trump's own Attorney General at the time, Bill Barr.
Okay, hold on. Hold on. Affirmed by Trump's own Attorney General, Bill Barr. You heard what John Eastman said. Bill Barr did no investigation whatsoever. Nothing. Just immediately said there were no irregularities. But continue.
Affirmed by others at the Department of Justice at the time under Trump, and every battleground state governor, and every battleground state secretary of state, regardless of party, and every election board, and every judge, on and on and on. It is a simple answer. Yes, Donald Trump lost to Joe Biden in 2020, just as Donald Trump won in 2016 and 2024. But here's how Mr. Smith answered the question.
The Electoral College cast their votes in December of 2020,
In January of 2021, Congress met to open and count those votes. And as a result of that process, Congress certified Joe Biden as the president.
So that's a dodge. He didn't answer the question. It's a judge nominee asserting facts about the electoral vote process without acknowledging that before that electoral vote process, Trump.
Okay. You heard Tapper say, just as President Trump won 2016 and won 2024. However, how many times did Hillary Clinton go on CNN during Trump 1.0 and refer to him as illegitimate? How many times did Hillary go on CNN and accuse the election of having been stolen, as well as going on other programs and saying it? She said it over and over and over again. Where was Jake Tapper? Where was Jake Tapper when former President Jimmy Carter said, I believe that in time we'll find out that the Russians put President Trump in office in 2016? Where was he? Terry McAuliffe, the former DNC chair, referred to President Trump as illegitimate. Kamala Harris, on the Charlemagne the God show, when Charlemagne said that Donald Trump was illegitimate, she agreed with him. My point is, Democrats for 4 years referred to President Trump 1.0 as illegitimate, as having been elected by the Russians. Where was Jake Tapper? The Obama DHS Secretary, Jay Johnson, testified under oath while the Russians tried to change vote tallies in 2016, they failed to change a single one. Yet a YouGov poll, respected, found that 2/3 of Democrats believe the Russians, quote, changed vote tallies, close quote, to elect Donald Trump. Even though Johnson testified again under oath, they didn't change a single one. But 2/3 of Democrats believe that. Where was Tapper? And CNN, Chris Cillizza, then their politics editor, I don't think he's there anymore, did a rant about how 76% of Republicans believe there was widespread voter fraud in 2020. A Gallup poll, 2018, found that 78% of Democrats believe there was widespread fraud during the 2016 election. So you can make an argument that a greater percentage of Democrats believe that 2016 was fraudulent than the percentage of Republicans who feel that way about 2020. Where was Tapper? And then let's talk about states that have been challenged. After the 2000 election, George W. Bush beat Al Gore. As you know, went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court stopped the counting in Florida. That following January, during certification, about a dozen House members challenged the certification of Florida, claiming that the Diebold voting machines had been rigged. No evidence, but that's what they said. Where was Tapper? 4 years later, George W. Bush wins re-election. 30 Democrat House members and one U.S. Senator, Barbara Boxer, challenged the certification of Ohio, claiming the Diebold voting machines had been tampered. 4 years earlier, they argued that the count was unlawfully stopped, even though the Supreme Court stopped it. Fast forward 2016, Democrats challenged more states when Trump won that election. The Republicans challenged in 2020. My point is, every single presidential Republican victory since 2000 has been challenged by House members during the certification process. And then you had a whole bunch of high-profile Democrats publicly accusing Donald Trump of having won the election because the Russians put him there, including a former president, Jimmy Carter. Did Jake Tapper do a rant about Democrat election deniers? He did not. This is why it is widely perceived, CNN, to be fake news. This is why so many people hold the media in so little regard. This is an example of hypocrisy and double standard and selective outrage. I'm Larry Elder.
As I've been telling candidates who have come to see me, you can run the best campaign, you can even become the nominee, and you can have the election stolen from you. Trump knows he's an illegitimate president who got illegitimate foreign help. He knows he's an illegitimate president. He knows that there were a bunch of different reasons why the election turned out the way it did. I know that he knows that this wasn't on the level.
Why do you think the president is going to such great lengths to essentially prove that he beat you?
Because he knows he didn't. He knows he's an illegitimate president. I do think that he knows that he's an illegitimate president.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Paging Jake Tapper. Did you have a problem with all these people? What about the former president? Listen to this.
And there's no doubt that the Russians did interfere in the election. And I think the interference, although not yet quantified, if fully investigated, would show that Trump didn't actually win the election in 2016. He lost the election, and he was put into office because the Russians interfered on his behalf.
John is in Clearwater, Florida. John, you're on the Larry Elder Show.
Oh, hey, Larry. How are you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure.
In my view, it was clearly a rigged election. But that's not the point. The point is, you better be thankful that it was a rigged election, because if it was not a rigged election, that means that the American people are so stupid they would elect a cucumber to the presidency. That's just the way I feel about it.
Well, John, if the cucumber were running against Donald Trump, you'd be right. But again, I think that the 2020 election was a blessing in disguise. It gave America 4 years to watch what happens under a Democrat administration. We had inflation hitting 9%, averaged 5% over the course of the 4 years of the Biden administration. We had the open borders. We had the pullout of Afghanistan the way he did, that emboldened Putin, that emboldened Iran, left $7-8 billion in cutting-edge military equipment, claimed falsely that nobody advised him that the Taliban would come back and the Afghan government would melt away, even though generals testified under oath that was exactly the advice they gave Biden. He did it anyway. 13 service members killed at Abbey Gate, left behind hundreds of Americans and thousands of Afghan collaborators. It was an absolute travesty. Nobody talks about it. Infusing the whole government with DEI. Nobody's talking about it. Now, President Trump is very unhappy with NATO. We've been defending Europe since the Second World War. Tens of thousands of troops in Europe, tens of thousands of troops in South Korea, in Japan. Even the NATO General Secretary, Mark Rutte, agreed with Trump that NATO is useless without us. Number 11.
So when President Trump is doing good stuff, I will praise him. And I don't mind him publishing text messages. And if anyone thinks here, again, that the European Union or Europe as a whole can defend itself without the US, keep on dreaming. You can't. We can't. We need each other. And why do we need each other? I tell you. First of all, because also the US needs NATO. And the US is not only in NATO to prevent a mistake after the First World War, not to re-engage with Europe. And then again, the long arm of history reaching out to the U.S. again in the Second World War, as Churchill famously said in his speech in 1941 in the U.S. Congress. They are also in NATO because for the U.S. to stay safe, and by the way, Arctic region is evidence here, they need a secure Arctic, they need a secure Euro-Atlantic, and they also need to secure Europe. So the U.S. has every interest in NATO as much as Canada and the European NATO allies. But for Europe, if you really want to go it alone, and those of you who are planning for that, forget that you can ever get there with 5%. It will be 10%. You have to build up your own nuclear capability. That costs billions and billions of euros. You will lose then, in that scenario, you would lose the ultimate guarantor of our freedom, which is the U.S. nuclear umbrella. Good luck.
The reason Europe has not come to our assistance is because of popular opinion. They despise Trump. And they've come to believe that if you just make nice with the Iranians, they'll make nice with you. Their economies, the gap between our productivities and theirs, is massive because of their welfare state, because of the influx of so-called migrants. They don't call them illegal aliens, they call them migrants. You think that a lot of Americans aren't proud to be Americans? How many British people are proud to be Brits? They're taking Winston Churchill off their currency because, after all, he's an imperialist. I saw a tweet about Europe. Europe is going to stop being a serious civilization within this generation, and almost nobody is willing to say it in those terms. The continent that gave us the scientific revolution, the industrial revolution, global empire, liberal democracy, and most of the intellectual and cultural inheritance the modern world runs on is genuinely going away. Europe stopped having children, stopped producing its own energy. Europe stopped defending itself militarily, stopped building industrial capacity, stopped growing its economies, as I said before, in real terms, stopped believing in its own cultural superiority. Europe built its prosperity on cheap Russian gas and cheap Middle Eastern oil. It shut down its own nuclear capability. It limited domestic extraction. It bet on so-called renewables. It's now taxing its wealthiest citizens. The military situation is a silent emergency. Basically, Europe has functionally disarmed over the past 30 years. And if America decides that Europe's security is Europe's problem, which Trump has been clear about, Europe has no independent capacity to protect itself. A continent that cannot defend itself is not a civilization. The president has been warring verbally with the Pope. The Pope says, I'm not warring with President Trump. Even Bill Maher teed off on the Pope. And a former senior advisor for the Obama-Biden White House said on CNN with no pushback that O.J. Simpson represents the black community because he killed 2 white people. I kid you not. All of this and more. 888-971-SAGE. Do not leave town.
Mr. Fix-It Man. 'Cause if you don't fix it, baby, maybe the milkman can fix it. Oh, yeah.
888-971-SAGE. 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Mark is in Los Angeles. Mark, always nice to hear from you.
Yes, Larry. I had something else I wanted to ask you, but I just can't believe that you said this about 20 minutes ago. So you said these people, I love when people say those people, but you use the Democrats primarily said, oh, look at what they're doing in Virginia with gerrymandering. But I guess maybe because you don't think all your viewers are informed, it was the Republican Party, specifically Donald Trump, that started gerrymandering for this 2026 campaign What did you expect the Democrats to do? Just said, "Oh, we're going to let them do whatever we want." Why don't you talk about Texas? Oklahoma,
did you, Mark? How long have you been,
Terry,
Mark? How long have you been listening today to the show? When did you turn it on?
About at that same time.
Okay, so you didn't hear
so
you didn't hear me talk about how Eric Holder started this whole thing in February of 2017, did you?
Okay, Larry.
I didn't think so. Here's an article from February 7, 2018 from NBC. Headline: Eric Holder leads Democrats to war on gerrymandering. Subheadline: As Democrats face uphill climb in 2018, former Attorney General Eric Holder is leading a new party effort to redraw the lines. Let me read you a paragraph. Quote, "The issue is hardly a morality play. Democrats themselves have a long history of gerrymandering, and the current map in Maryland drawn with Democrat majorities includes an especially awkward district that is the subject of a GOP lawsuit the Supreme Court plans to hear," end of quote. Also, did you hear me play this? Play number 20 for Mark. Number 20.
Hate about Democrats. But you're actively campaigning.
Number 20.
During the redistricting process that occurred in 2011, Republicans used new technology to take gerrymandering to what I would say were unprecedented levels. By creating safe districts, they locked themselves into power over this past decade and shut out, I believe, voters from the electoral process. We're going to focus on switching the balance of power on redistricting by electing Democrats committed to redistricting, fair redistricting, in key races that will have an impact on that process.
Okay, we can stop there. Mark, do you understand?
Larry,
Democrats.
Larry.
You know where the word gerrymander came from? A Democrat-Republican governor. So please, just understand your history, brother. You ignore what Eric Holder did in 2018. You've completely ignored that. You've ignored what Democrats have done for a very long period of time. You completely ignore that. And when Donald Trump tried to do something about it by telling Texas, let's retaliate, all of a sudden you have a problem. And Texas has a law that allows you to do it. California did not. They had to change the Constitution to do that.
And Oklahoma and all the other states that did it, and North Carolina that's doing it. And what Eric Holder, we've had this conversation before. I don't believe in gerrymandering.
And in Virginia, this is a purple state where almost half of the voters are Republicans. If this thing goes through, that the governor in Virginia supports, the number of Republican representatives in Virginia will be reduced to 1. Is that fair? Of course it isn't. And in California, it's gone from 11 now down to 4 in a state that voted about 40% Republican. It's unfair. Democrats have abused the system far more than Republicans ever have. It's not even close.
First of all, 8 years ago is 8 years ago. We're talking about
let's ignore 8 years ago. Let's ignore the history of this. Let's ignore the history of this.
Two wrongs don't make a right. That's usually your argument.
Well, fine. If two wrongs don't make a right, then why are you retaliating against what Donald Trump is doing in Texas?
I'm not. I'm just saying, well, if he wants to do it, we got to be sure we are level up.
Well, that sounds like two wrongs make a right then. Of course you're saying it.
No, because I'm not saying, fine, if the Republicans want to do it, more power to them. I have no problem if that's what the base of the Republicans want to do. But then at the same time, they shouldn't be complaining that the Democrats are doing it.
And Mark, you and I are both in California. And in California, a few years ago, when Schwarzenegger was governor, the voters took the power of redistricting out of the hands of politicians and put them into a so-called nonpartisan commission. And then when Donald Trump did what he did in Texas, Gavin Newsom got all these Democrats to reverse what they voted for just a few years earlier. And if you look at what's going on in Texas, Texas is a red state. So what are you complaining about? California is a blue state, but it did have at least 11 House Republicans. Now it's going to only have 4 or 5. Is that fair, Mark?
Just as unfair as Oklahoma.
Okay, it's not fair. Didn't think so. Hey, parents and grandparents, think about every science documentary, every textbook, every streaming special your kids have ever watched. They all tell you the same story. We're here by accident. The universe is random. Life is a fluke. That's the only narrative that gets airtime. But what if the actual science tells a different story? I'm proud to introduce The story of everything. The kind of film that Hollywood would never greenlight and the mainstream would rather you never see. It explores the staggering math of intelligent design. When you look at the precise laws of physics required for life to exist, the probability of accident vanishes. The evidence doesn't point to chaos, it points to a designer. The story of everything features Dr. Stephen Meyer from the Discovery Institute and challenges the one-sided story with hard science and undeniable logic. Every parent and grandparent has a responsibility to make sure the next generation hears more than just the version that popular culture has chosen for them. The math is there, the science is clear. And the story of everything is finally giving the science a platform. Over 600 theaters nationwide for 1 week only, April 30th through May 6th. Go to thestoryofeverything.film, thestoryofeverything.film, and get tickets. Thestoryofeverything.film. Triple 8-971 SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel coming to you from the Relief Factor studio. Don't forget your Relief Factor, 800-4RELIEF, 800-4RELIEF, ReliefFactor.com. That's ReliefFactor.com. Coming up, we're going to talk about the exchange between Republican House member Hank Johnson, who teed off on that hearing about migrant crime, claiming all it is a distraction, and Texas Republican Brandon Gill's reaction to that. We're also going to talk about the verbal battle between the president and the Pope. Pope says that he really isn't fighting with President Trump. We're also going to be talking about this notion that illegal aliens, according to CNN, are not getting Medicaid, even though they are getting Medicaid. All this and more, 888-971-SAGE. Todd is in Omaha. Todd, you're in the Larry Elder Show. Thank you for calling.
Hey, Larry, thanks. Hey, you played clips from both sides of the aisle of the elections been stolen. And the accusations of many elections that have been stolen in 2016, 2020, 2024. Mm-hmm. But what I want to know is, see, you can't just stop saying, well, the Russians did it. See, I want to know how the Russians did it, so neither side can do that again. You need to do your follow-up. Tell us how exactly it was stolen so we can help the USA to have perfect elections. You can't just stop with the allegations and say, well, the Chinese did this, the Russians did that. No, I want to know what they did to throw the election.
Well, if you're talking about 2016 and what the Russians did, they bought a bunch of Facebook ads. I've talked about this over the years. They bought a bunch of Facebook ads. Half of them were pro-Hillary. Half of them were pro-Trump. Some of them were pro-Black Lives Matter. Some of them were anti-Black Lives Matter. All they wanted to do was sow confusion so that no matter what the result was, Americans would question it. And they attempted to alter vote tallies. But Jay Johnson, the Obama DHS secretary, testified under oath that the Russians failed to change a single vote tally. And while the Russians did interfere by doing the things I just now said, he does not know whether or not it altered public opinion. There was a big study done by NYU Stern School of Management that looked into the Russian interference and found the interference was, quote, barely measurable, close quote, meaning it had no real effect. That's why it is just so mind-boggling that two-thirds of Democrats, despite what Jay Johnson said, believe that the Russians, quote, altered vote tallies when Jay Johnson testified under oath they failed to change a single vote tally. And according to Gallup, 78% of Democrats believe the Russian interference altered the outcome of the election, even though the Stern management study, as I just now said that the Russian interference had a, quote, barely measurable, meaning almost nothing, effect on the election. Now, regarding 2020, what do I believe specifically happened? Well, let's just take Wisconsin. I urge you all to go on Rumble and watch the speech given by John Eastman, one of Trump's 2020 lawyers. In Wisconsin, you're supposed to send a Republican monitor and a Democrat monitor to nursing homes so that people don't somehow get people who are not really cognizant to sign up and vote. Well, they didn't do that because of COVID. And so you went from having 20% of people in nursing homes voting to almost 90%. Now, I don't know whether or not they voted for Joe Biden, but I suspect that they didn't vote for Donald Trump. and including people in memory wing. There's video of people. You can go on YouTube and look at it for yourself. There's video of people sitting with their loved ones in memory wings in nursing homes saying, I have no idea how my father voted because he doesn't even know where he is, let alone filling out a ballot. So major shenanigans. And there's something called Democracy in the Park, where a bunch of people were registering people in parks. And going forward, Wisconsin now says it's unlawful. It was unlawful at the time. And then you have Michigan, where the Secretary of State used COVID as an excuse to send mail-in ballot applications to every registered voter, whether he or she requested one, very likely increasing the percentage of people who voted mail-in. And then in Pennsylvania, unilaterally, election officials changed the requirements for signature matching and accepted ballots after the election day. All of this would have required the legislature to approve it, and instead election officials did it. So those are just 3 states. So do I believe there were shenanigans? Absolutely I do. And forget about all of that. How about this? How about the Hunter Biden laptop story suppression? This letter of 51 former intelligence officials, they signed it, claiming that the Hunter Biden laptop story had all the, quote, hallmarks of Russian disinformation, close quote, to the point where the New York Post story that exposed this was shut down on Facebook and shut down on what later on became X, Twitter. Jack Dorsey, the CEO of then Twitter, said we were wrong to suppress that story. And there's at least a study that said, you look at the swing states, roughly 16% of Joe Biden voters said had they known about the Hunter Biden laptop story, they would not have voted for Joe Biden, meaning that Donald Trump would have won the re-election handily. So do I believe that there was shenanigans? Do I believe that 2020 was rigged, to use that term? Yes, I do. And when I was asked that question, when I ran for governor, it was the first thing they asked me, do you believe that Joe Biden won the election? I said, well, he won his lawsuits. Yeah, but do you believe he won the election? Well, he won his lawsuits. He's been certified. What do you believe? Larry Elder is an election denier. Never mind, Hillary. Hillary is an election denier. Former President Jimmy Carter is an election denier. The former DNC head Terry McAuliffe is an election denier. Kamala Harris is an election denier, but nobody seems to have a problem with that. And as I said earlier, Democrats have challenged the certification of every Republican victory starting in 2000. About a dozen of them challenged the certification of Florida, claiming that the Supreme Court should not have stopped the count. About 30 of them challenged 2004, claiming Ohio was manipulated because of the deboned voting machine. Diebold is a company whose CEOs are Republicans, or owners are Republicans, they said, and therefore they tampered with the vote tally. 30 House members. Were they called election deniers? Were they called obstructionists? And then fast forward to 2016, as I said, the Democrats challenged more states in 2016, Republicans challenged in 2020, but nobody called them election deniers. They have been denying elections for a very long time, and people like Jake Tapper give them a complete and total pass. That's my problem. Now, our founders believed that freedom wasn't just a word, it was a way of life. The freedom to move forward, the freedom to pursue what matters most, the freedom to live fully. But pain is a way of taking those freedoms away. I've told you about my buddy, Tom, an avid golfer, scratch golfer. Out on the course almost every single day, something he said he couldn't pull off without Relief Factor because of pain and lower back pain. Relief Factor is a 100% drug-free, research-based supplement designed to support a healthy inflammatory response, addressing pain at its source, not just covering it up. Over 1 million Americans have found relief and reclaimed parts of life they thought were behind them. So this year, as we celebrate 250 years of freedom, ask yourself a simple question. Are you living with the freedom you deserve? Relief Factor gives you the opportunity to live pain-free and get back to the life you love. Try Relief Factor today for just $19.95, less than $1 a day. Your 3-week quick start is ready for you. Visit ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com, or call 800-4-RELIEF, 800 the number 4 relief.
Reminiscing all the things that I thought you to do.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-SAGE. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Coming up, I'm going to talk about the rant Hank Johnson, Democrat, did during a hearing on migrant crime, claiming it's just nothing more than a distraction. And a former Obama advisor says O.J. Simpson represents the black community. Why? Because he killed 2 white people. You think I'm making this up? I'm not making this up. California Democrats want to pass what's been called the Stop Nick Shirley Act to make it more difficult to uncover fraud. All of this and more coming up in the next hour. One more comment, though, to my friend Mark about gerrymandering. And that's why I asked Mark when was he listening today, because I started talking about this early in the show. I don't think Mark was there, so this is not a criticism of Mark. He just wasn't there. President Obama has come out against gerrymandering until he was now come out in favor of it in the case of Virginia, making the same argument that Mark is making. Well, we have to do something about what Donald Trump is doing in Texas, even though Texas law allows it to do what it's doing. California law had to be changed. Obama, when he was a state senator in Illinois, decided to run for the U.S. House. The incumbent was a Democrat named Bobby Rush. Obama primaried him, and Obama got crushed. Bobby Rush characterized Obama basically as a carpet-bagging guy from Hawaii who didn't understand the streets, didn't understand the hood. He was an elitist who taught at University of Chicago, went to Harvard Law School. What does he know about regular Americans, regular black Americans in particular? Basically, he called him a sellout. However, Obama did well in affluent areas of the district, in areas that were heavily Jewish, in areas that were white and were wealthy. As I said, affluent. So what did State Senator Obama do? He used computers and a local politician named Corrigan to help him redesign his district to make it more likely that Obama would be reelected. So he redesigned it. As I said, made it more Jewish, less black, less poor. And the man who helped him redesign the district said it was a very different district than the one that Obama had before. Did anybody have a problem with that? Did anybody call Obama unscrupulous, manipulative? Did they accuse Obama of choosing his voters rather than the voters choosing him? Oh, wait a minute. There's a different standard if Democrats do it. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. Don't go away. So let's get her teed up!
You want to play rough? Say hello to my little friend!
What the hell's going on out here?
Ooh, that's a bingo!
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. We're going to talk about the exchange between the president and the Pope. We're going to talk about the Obama advisor that says O.J. Simpson represents the black community because he killed 2 white people. I'm not making this up. We're going to talk about California. The Democrats are trying to pass a Stop Nick Shirley Act to make it more difficult to uncover fraud. And Gavin Newsom campaign money accounted for 2/3 of the sales of his New York Times best-selling book. 2/3 of the books were purchased by Gavin Newsom's own campaign, which is how he became a bestseller author. All this and more, 888-971-SAGE. Now, the Democrat Socialist Mayor Zoran Mamdani has opened his first of reportedly 5 city-owned grocery stores. It's going to be in Harlem. It cost $30 million to build from the ground up. And you know what's going to happen. Going to be long lines, shortages, poor service. How do we know this? It's been tried. It's been tried in somewhere called Erie, Kansas, Baldwin, Florida, Oh, also tried in the Soviet Union. Shortages, empty shelves, rationing, on and on and on and on, which reminds me of the joke that President Ronald Reagan told, number 7.
I've been collecting stories that are told in the Soviet Union by their people among themselves, which reveal they've got a great sense of humor, but they've also got a pretty cynical attitude toward their system. And I told this one, Bill, you'll have to hear it again. I told it in the car. I didn't tell this one to Gorbachev. You know, there's a 10-year delay in the Soviet Union of delivery of an automobile. And only 1 out of 7 families in the Soviet Union own automobiles. There's a 10-year wait. And you go through quite a process when you're ready to buy, and then you put up the money in advance. And this happened to a fellow, and this is their story that they tell, this joke. That this man, he laid down his money, and then the fellow that was in charge said to him, okay, come back in 10 years and get your car. And he said, morning or afternoon? And the fellow behind the counter said, well, 10 years from now, what difference does it make? And he said, well, the plumber's coming in the morning.
Now, Congress held hearings on migrant crime. Hank Johnson, a Democrat from Georgia, said the whole thing was nothing more than a distraction. And Brandon Gill from Texas had a response to him. First, let's hear what Hank Johnson said, number 17.
All victims of violent crime deserve justice, but this hearing is not about justice. It's entitled The Human Toll of Sanctuary Policies, Stories from Victims and Families. We could very well have done a hearing on the human toll of the Trump MAGA tax cuts on 17 million Americans who got their health care access and food security ripped out from under them so that the wealthiest billionaires in this country could get another tax cut. Or we could have entitled this hearing or had a hearing on the human toll of Trump's stupid war with Iran and how it's making life increasingly unaffordable for people here in America, except for the wealthiest Americans. They can pay whatever the price is. We could have had a hearing on the human toll of Trump's desperate cover-up of the Epstein files, the toll that has played on the victims of that international child sex abuse ring. But no, we are here today, and not to cast any aspersions on any of you for testifying, but this is a Steve Miller-approved hearing whose sole aim is to stir up passion and bias and prejudice against immigrants who are people of color. Now, I mean, we have had mass murder after mass murder in this country perpetrated by all kinds of people. But I just want to talk about those that have been perpetrated by white males. Robert Card opened fire at a bowling alley in Lewistown, Maine, killing 18 people, wounding 13. Peyton Gendron, white supremacist, killed 10 people in a racist attack at a supermarket in Buffalo, New York. Randy Stair, a 32-year-old suspected of killing a family of 4 in Romeoville, Illinois. Richard Dale Crum, a 52-year-old man in Arcabutler, Mississippi, who shot and killed 6 people, including his ex-wife and stepfather. 38-year-old Courtney Gordon, who stabbed 4 relatives, including 2 children, to death in New York City. And I could go on in terms of tragedies and victims of tragedy who could be brought here to talk about this MAGA Republican failure to do anything about gun control. So this is, even the fact that Mr. Romanuschi, you are seated number 3 instead of number 4, I mean, normally the three Republican witnesses would be seated together, not sandwiching the Democratic witness in between you, but, you got sandwiched today for the dramatic effect of it. It's all politics. And it's unfortunate what my friends here on the other side of the aisle are perpetrating. Mr. Romanucci, the killing of Miss Good was not was by rogue ICE officers, federal agents who can't even be sued for, the damage that they have done to your client's loved ones. That's wrong. That's why I've introduced the Bivens Act, which would allow people to bring federal officials into court and sue them against these egregious actions. There are many. Certainly, they equate. I'm not minimizing the tragedy that is before us today with you three women, but the other tragedies at the hands of non-immigrants, just as important. My Bivens Act would ensure that all victims and their loved ones can get justice, even if the perpetrator is a government official. And that's why I've also introduced the Constitutional Accountability Act, which would establish that federal, state, and local governments have the same respondeat superior liability that private employers have for their employees. So there's much we can do to bring justice to those who have been aggrieved by tragedy. Congress, this MAGA Republican Congress, is incapable and unwilling to do anything in that regard, and that's unfortunate.
Wow. Here's what Brandon Gill said to what Hank Johnson just now said, number 18.
With that, I recognize Mr. Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing, and thank you to the witnesses for coming here and telling us your stories and your family's stories. Before we get into that, I think it's worth saying that was one of the most disgusting testimonies I have ever heard. To have Hank come in here and lecture angel families about how they shouldn't be here, how we shouldn't be holding this hearing. What the hell is wrong with you guys? The reason they're here is because of open borders that you guys perpetrated for 4 years. And to come in here and to turn this into a MAGA Republican idiotic low IQ lecture is sickening. To whine about which seats they're in, it's disgusting.
This is the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Listen to this, number 27.
No interruption. So let me just answer that. I do appreciate you begging. So I would just say it like this, that the president has always been intimidated by the intellectual prowess of black men. And so, of course, he would speak in those petite and puerile terms.
The president has always been intimidated by the intellectual prowess of black men, close quote. And your basis for saying that is what? Oh, wait a minute, I forgot, you're a Democrat. You don't need a basis. We come back, we're going to talk about the exchange the president's been having with the Pope. 888-971-SAGE. I'm Larry Elder. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Lorraine is in St. Paul. Lorraine, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you for calling.
Wow, that was quick. Larry, you remind me of how my father was. If somebody crossed the line in our house that he built, he would take charge. And it seems every Monday you come out of the gate, and I love it. Because it reminds me of my dad, and it's been 1 year on April 10th. So God bless you.
Lorraine, thank you so much for that. I appreciate how honored I am to be in the same sentence with your father. Thank you so much for that. This was a discussion on CNN. The host is Abby Phillip, and she told Scott Jennings, who does great work on CNN, also a member of our team here at Salem, illegal aliens are not getting Medicaid. Number 9.
Other debate about who's going to get taxpayer-funded Medicaid in this country, that's what the memes are about. That's what the fight is about. Democrats want to make it about this subsidy issue. They don't run out to the end of the year, by the way. But the real thing is they filed legislation to repeal what the Republicans did this summer. And so these two issues have been conflated. But the fact is they don't just want the subsidies. They want other things. And the president is drawing attention to it, I think, in a pretty clever way. We just had a national emergency about telling jokes. I don't know why people
still
can't
not going to illegal immigrants, Scott.
It is. It really does.
It's not.
It really does.
So it
does in several
not,
blue states.
Scott, no, it's not.
It really does.
Listen, the part of the bill that deals with the money that goes to states, it doesn't say anything about their immigration policy. So red state or blue state, those states are getting less money from the federal government. That still has to be dealt with. And that has nothing to do with immigration. And again, Medicaid does not go to undocumented immigrants. SNAP does not go to undocumented immigrants. CHIP does not go to undocumented immigrants.
It absolutely does.
I don't know. I mean, Scott, prove me wrong.
How many blue states?
Show me the law.
How many blue states? Mike Johnson showed it.
Scott, show me the U.S.
in a gigantic poster on
Friday. Show me the U.S. code where it says that they're allowed to get Medicaid funding.
I will
put
it out on social media.
It doesn't exist.
Right,
in fact, the law says exactly the opposite. So
they're trying to repeal what the Republicans did this summer.
Scott, that is a lie. Okay,
it is not.
Now you might want to dispute whether or not states should get reimbursed from the federal, or should get federal dollars for Medicaid at the levels that they got it before. That's a different issue. But that's not an issue that's actually tied to immigration, and you know it. But go ahead.
Prove me wrong. Okay, this is an exchange between a Texas Democrat named Craig Kassar to the HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy. Listen to this, number 8.
Have you met with any of the 1.4 million people who have lost their health insurance just this last year from dropping off of Obamacare? Have you sat down and talked to those folks about the fact they won't have their health insurance again?
They're almost all illegal immigrants.
Oh, well, you know what? It sounds like you haven't met with folks like Portia in my district.
We found 1.5 million illegal immigrants illegally collecting Medicaid.
Mr. Secretary, there are people like Portia and
They're almost all illegal immigrants. 1.5 million. Well, have you met with so-so? 1.5 million. Obviously, he's lying, right? The president has been going back and forth with the Pope. Pope says, hey, I'm not arguing with the president. I'm just not. And the president had a couple of things to say about the Pope. Number 13.
Iran's going to execute 4 more protesters, reportedly, including the first woman protester. What do you tell Iran?
Well, tell that to the Pope. What do you say? Tell that to the Pope.
You want to patch things up with the Pope?
That Iran is going to... Did you just hear that? Iran is going to execute 4 people, including a woman?
Did the Pope say anything about the public executions, including of women? Did he say anything about the 20, 30,000 or so people that were executed, killed in the streets, unarmed? But the Pope says he's not quarreling with the president. Number 23.
There's been a certain narrative that has not been accurate in all of its aspects, but because of the political situation created when on the first day of the trip, the President of the United States made some comments about myself. Much of what has been written since then has been more commentary on commentary, trying to interpret what has been said. Just one little example, the talk that I gave at the prayer meeting for peace a couple of days ago was prepared 2 weeks ago, well before the president ever commented on myself and on the message of peace that I am promoting. And yet, as it happens, it was looked at as if I was trying to debate, again, the president, which is not my interest at all.
Let's hear the president again, number 13.
Iran's going to execute 4 more protesters, reportedly, including the first woman protester. What do you tell Iran?
Well, tell that to the Pope. What do you say? Tell that to the Pope.
You want to patch things up with the Pope?
That Iran is going to... Did you just hear that? Iran is going to execute 4 people, including war?
Here's what Bill Maher said, number 15.
I love hypocritical America. I really do. See, the liberals suddenly love the Pope. The Pope, who 2 weeks ago was all in the headlines. You know why? Exorcisms. Yeah, this big thing about we got to exorcise. The demons are all around, the devil. That's who the Pope is, okay? A guy who does exorcism, doesn't believe in gay marriage, no women priests. But now, because he's feuding with Trump, MSNBC loves this guy. He got a big speech on the floor from Chuck Schumer. Eric Swalwell sent him a pic.
Has he said anything about these public executions? I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe he said something about the fact that Iran is recruiting boys as young as 12 years old to fight. Maybe he said something. Maybe I just didn't hear it. Maybe the Pope said something during the Iran-Iraq war when Iran was putting plastic necklaces around the necks of boys as young as 12 years old and asking them to walk over minefields to clear the mine so that their soldiers and tanks could roll through. Tens of thousands of young boys were blown up by these mines. Maybe the Pope said something, I don't know. But Donald Trump's a bad guy for trying to prevent something like that, a regime like that, from getting a nuclear bomb. Is there any evidence whatsoever that Iran would not use a nuclear bomb if it had one? The Democrats have a Hassan Piker problem. I'll talk about that when I come back as well. 888-971-SAGE.
The holy light, turning darkness into light. There are strange things happening every day.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder, Salem News Channel, coming to you from the Relief Factor studio. Don't forget your Relief Factor, 800-4RELIEF, 800-4RELIEF, ReliefFactor.com. That's ReliefFactor.com. Todd is in Atlanta. Todd, you're on the Larry Elder Show.
Hey, Larry, thanks for taking my call. I think the Chicago Pope needs a history lesson. Apparently he forgot about the collaboration between the Pope and Mussolini, not even 100 years ago, back in the 1920s, and the invasion of Ethiopia and the death of millions of Ethiopians. So, he forgot about the Inquisitions and the indulgences and the Crusades. He forgot about the pedophile priests.
Mm-hmm.
The Catholic Church didn't turn them into the police. They moved them around to different parishes and covered it up. So, I think he needs a history lesson in his own history, Well,
Todd, thank you very much for that. And when it comes to Hitler, a pope condemned Hitler by name. His successor was far more muted in his criticism. So it's still being debated about the level of force of condemnation of Hitler and fascism from the Pope at the time, or the two popes at the time. Now let's turn to something else. Nick Shirley is explaining the Stop Nick Shirley Act, that's what he's calling it, that the Democrats have just gotten out of committee. It's going to be voted on by the whole assembly at some point. That will make it more difficult for people like Nick Shirley to investigate and uncover fraud. He explains exactly what California is doing, number 22.
Here in California, they are trying to pass the Stop Nick Shirley Act. The official title of this bill is AB 2624, and today we're going to be confronting the legislators that are trying to pass this bill. And if this bill were to get passed, instead of going after the fraudsters, they're trying to make it criminal to go after the people that are committing this fraud. For instance, it would become criminal to film and reveal info on taxpayer-funded immigration services like healthcare, which would include daycare, hospices. It also covers counseling services, translation services, and immigration legal services. So, for instance, if the Quality Leering Center was inside of California, it would be illegal to expose them. It would make it illegal to film government-funded NGOs. And this bill essentially wants to shield the info of immigrant support services from the public. So your tax dollars, you'd have no idea where it's going because it would then become confidential, and you would not be able to see how much money that NGO is getting if it's going towards immigrant services. And what makes this bill super interesting is the lady who created this bill, her name is Mia Bonta. Her husband is the Attorney General of California named Rob Bonta. You cannot make this up. So you have the Attorney General who's supposed to prosecute and go after the fraudsters, and then you have his wife who's trying to pass bills to go after the people exposing the fraud. Like, seriously, this is absolutely crazy. And the AG, Rob Bonta, just a few days ago said they were cracking down on the fraud way before certain people came into the state.
We've been doing it successfully before certain people in this country decided to think about it for the first time.
However, it was only after I exposed over $100 million in fraud they actually made any arrest here inside of California. Let's say this bill gets passed. What could happen to you if you expose fraud or go and look into immigration services? Well, you could receive a $4,000 fine underneath a civil fine, a $10,000 fine if it's criminal, and a $50,000 fine if it becomes a felony. You may also face potential imprisonment, and your content be forced to be taken down. This is a complete violation of the First Amendment, as they are trying to take down and suppress your own speech, make it so you can't film in public, which is taking away your freedom of press. There's a whole lot of issues with this bill, and today we're going to be confronting those that co-authored, signed, and passed this bill.
Welcome to California. Now, this is a Democrat Michigan Senate candidate explaining why he's campaigning with Hassan Piker, number 24.
Hate about Democrats, but you're actively campaigning with them. It's a choice you're making. So,
for sure.
So why make that choice to actively campaign with them?
Because I know that he's having a conversation with a number of folks who feel locked out.
Hassan Piker is having a conversation with a number of folks who feel locked out, says this Democrat Senate candidate from Michigan. Here is the aforementioned Hassan Piker, number 25.
So my question is, when you say Hamas is 1,000 times better, do you actually mean that? Or is that a rhetorical move or like a solidarity signal? Like what?
I mean, it's all of the above. I do mean it. I think it's a rhetorical move because it frustrates a lot of people. I've also said I'm a harm reduction voter, I'm a lesser evil voter, and therefore I would vote for Hamas over Israel every single time.
Hamas, he said, is 1,000 times better than Israel. This is a man that's Democrat Michigan Senate candidate is campaigning with. We come back, I'll play what Hassan Piker said about Israeli women who were raped on October 7. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words weren't written just for the history books. They're written for you. But it's hard to pursue happiness when pain is part of everyday life. Relief Factor was created to help people address inflammation, one of the most common causes of ongoing aches and pain from aging, overexertion, and daily living. It's a 100% drug-free, research-based formula that works through multiple metabolic pathways to support comfort and mobility. No prescription, no masking symptoms, just real relief so you can keep moving forward. I've told you about Tom, my avid golfing buddy, scratch golfer, out on the course almost every day, says he couldn't pull that off without Relief Factor. As America celebrates 250 years of independence, give yourself the chance to reclaim your independence. Relief Factor, because freedom just feels better without pain. Try the Relief Factor today for $19.95, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com, 800-4-RELIEF, 800 the number 4 relief. 888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Here is Hassan Piker giving his view about Israeli women who were raped on October 7, 26.
Here's some of what he actually has said about the depravity of the October 7 terror attack, the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Quote, "It doesn't matter if effing rapes happened on October 7th. Like, that doesn't change the dynamic for me. The Palestinian resistance is not perfect. Now, let that sink in. Hassan Piker is excusing sexual violence by Hamas terrorists. He also claims Hamas is, quote, 1,000 times better than Israel. Hamas is a designated terror organization, not just by the U.S., but by the EU, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, just to name a few. And here's what Piker said about the horrors of September 11th, 2001.
America deserved 9/11, dude. I'm saying it. Like, we totally brought it on ourselves, dude. We did. We did.
And the Michigan Senate candidate who campaigns with him is named Abdul El Sayed. Here's what he said, the candidate himself, about Israel versus Hamas, number 30.
You said the Israeli government is evil. Do you think they're just as evil as Hamas?
Yes, killing tens of thousands of people makes you pretty damn evil. It's not how evil is this one versus that one. Hamas, evil. Israeli government, evil.
Okay. This is a former senior advisor to the Obama-Biden White House. Her name is Ashley Allison. Here's what she said with no pushback on CNN about O.J. Simpson representing the black community because he killed, quote, 2 white people. Number 21.
But it was so racially charged because of what had happened just before with Rodney King, but also just how black Americans feel about policing. It's not like O.J. Simpson was the leader of the civil rights movement of his era. You know, he wasn't a social justice leader, but he represented something for the black community in that moment, in that trial, particularly because there were 2 white people who had been killed, and the history around how black people have been persecuted during slavery. There were just so many layers. And I guess I would just close with this, is that there was racial tension then, there is racial tension now. It might not be the backdrop of the Trump campaign, but until this country is ready to actually have an honest conversation about the racial dynamics from our origin story till today, we will always have moments like O.J. Simpson that manifest, and our country will always be divided if we don't actually deal with the issue of race.
For crying out loud. And notice no pushback from the 3 other members of that panel. O.J. Simpson represented something for the black community because he killed 2 white people. Until we have an honest conversation about race, we're always going to have these problems. There was an article in the New Republic, which is a left-wing magazine, during the trial. Came out in April 1995. And it was written by a high school teacher in New Jersey. He has 5 classes of sophomores. All students are black and Hispanic. Headline, Race, OJ, and My Kids. And he talks about how they discussed the trial in class. Quote, no more than 4 of my 110 students thinks O.J. Simpson is definitely guilty. And few are willing to admit the possibility that he might be. The faith in Simpson is strongest among black girls. One girl suggested the case against O.J. isn't crazy. Bad move. She was viciously attacked until she admitted that, yes, she was just kidding. Of course O.J. Simpson is innocent. All but a few of my students are black or Hispanic. They refuse to concede that some jurors might vote for O.J. because he is black. My students are more than willing to supply the real culprit, he writes. One student suggested that Ron Goldman killed Nicole before killing himself and then throwing away the knife. Another believes the dog did it. Another girl suggests that Al Cowlings, Simpson's best buddy, did it. Bryant believes the killer is O.J.'s son. Philip blames that, and he used a pejorative for gays, that blank dude who wants to marry O.J., close quote, referring to Cato Kalin. John, a bright student, had his own scenario. O.J. was shaving and cut himself. Cato took the blood from the shaving cut, brought it to the crime scene, and dumped it. Why, I asked, did O.J. collect his blood after he cut himself shaving? John called me a racist, and that was that. While no non-white student believes O.J. did it, few are upset about the crime itself. Simply, they do not like Nicole. This sentiment runs especially strong among black girls. Eunicia said that Nicole got what she deserved for messing with a black man. Wait, I said, don't you think it's wrong that O.J. beat her? No, women control these types of situations. Nicole roped O.J. in just to get his money. If it weren't for Nicole, O.J. would have stayed with his first wife, one said, who of course was black. What about the beatings? Quote, the beating didn't bother Nicole too much, so why should it bother me? Why, I asked, do you think the beatings did not bother Nicole? She sounded frantic on the 911 call. Quote, it was just for show, one girl said, otherwise she would have left him. Another one pointed out, well, she did leave. And then the other one responded, well, she didn't leave soon enough. She didn't leave soon enough because she wanted his money and his fame. Not one black girl, he wrote, identified with Nicole as a woman. They instead identified with O.J. as a black person. The anti-Nicole bias is most prevalent in students from broken homes, which is most of them, he said. What about Ron Goldman? He was ignored. So this is the level of discussion that took place in this high school class, according to this New Jersey teacher who wrote about this. The dog did it. Al Cowlings did it. Cato Kalin did it. Scary. Right now, our Jewish friends feel forgotten. There's a Jewish woman named Esther I'd like to tell you about. In her home in Israel, Esther is living through days and nights of fear. Sirens sounding, rockets screaming through the sky, long stretches spent in a bomb shelter. 84 years old, Esther is elderly, fragile, and alone. Imagine that. No help, no food deliveries, no medical care, no one knocking at the door. In a war zone. But because of friends like you, Esther is not alone. Through the fellowship, you are there, bringing food, meeting urgent needs, and reminding Jewish people like Esther, you are not forgotten. In times of fear and uncertainty, your compassion brings hope and help. Esther asks that you hear these words. To those who give, you are doing a very great mitzvah, a good deed. You give from your hearts, may God protect you. Visit supportifcj.org, supportifcj.org.
You gotta shake the blues out of your shoes when there ain't nothing left to say.
But it was so racially charged because of what had happened just before with Rodney King, but also just how Black Americans feel about policing. It's not like O.J. Simpson was the leader of the civil rights movement of his era. You know, he wasn't a social justice leader, but he represented something for the Black community in that moment, in that trial, particularly because there were two white people who had been killed, and the history around how Black people have been persecuted during slavery. There were just so many layers, and I guess I would just close with this, is that there was racial tension then, there is racial tension now. It might not be the backdrop of the Trump campaign, but until this country is ready to actually have an honest conversation about the racial dynamics from our origin story till today, we will always have moments like O.J. Simpson that manifest, and our country will always be divided if we don't actually deal with the issue of race.
888-971-SAGE, 888-971-7243. I am Larry Elder. We are Salem News Channel. Until we have an honest conversation about race, how much more do we have to talk about this? And about the idea that maybe, just maybe, some of the O.J. Simpson jurors would find him not guilty just because he's black, just because he's O.J. Listen to this juror years later explaining she did just that. Number 38.
Do you think that they're members of the jury? that voted to acquit OJ because of Rodney King?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
How many of you felt that way?
Oh, probably 90% of us.
Do you
90%?
think jurors?
Did you feel that way?
Yes.
That was payback.
Uh-huh.
You think that's right?
Hey, is what it is, right? Is what it is. Let me end with this, number 14.
My grandma says there are only two things in life that you worry about, whether you're healthy or whether you're sick. If you're healthy, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you're sick, you got two things to worry about. Whether you're going to get better, whether you're going to get worse. You get better, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you get worse, you got two things to worry about. Whether you're going to live, whether you're going to die. If you live, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you die, you got two things. Whether you're going to heaven, whether you're going to hell. If you go to heaven, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But if you go to hell, you got two things to worry about. Original or extra crispy?
Now you just do what you wanna do, my wild and sweet
Andy Chrisman of For Him has spent 40-plus years in Christian music, and chances are he knows your favorite artist personally. Now he's bringing you their stories.
I'm Andy Chrisman.
In his new podcast, 1 Degree of Andy, he sits down with the voices behind the songs for real, honest, and faith-filled conversations you won't hear anywhere else.
That's a great question.
If you love Christian music, this is your backstage pass.
The 1 Degree of Andy podcast.
Listen now to 1 Degree of Andy wherever you get your podcasts.